welcome to our live vlog for today. Now, I'm sure a couple of you might have thought that, Gerda, you've forgotten to do your live vlog today, which in fact I haven't. So as you know, you have to wait for all good things in life. So I made you wait for tonight's vlog. So as we wait just for people to hop on live, which is always the best situation, so that we can actually interact, what I'm going to do is just also share this live stream in my Facebook groups, just so that those guys can also get a notification to say that we have actually started. So let me just share that in here. Will literally take me 30 seconds. There we go. First one done. Okay. Second one, so that was for the practice owners. Second group I'm going to share it in is for those clinicians interested in starting their very own private practice. And then last but not least, I'm going to share it in my masterclass graduate group. So these are all the practice owners that's actually attended my masterclass weekend workshop and graduated successfully from that experience. So that is all done. Excellent. Hi Laura, thanks for joining me. Hi Amy, thanks for joining me. I hope you've got your crackers and your dip and your glass of wine. I don't drink alcohol really, but I thought in the spirit of being a team player, I've got some dessert wine, that really sweet wine, and this is all you can drink or you'll be tipsy in 10 minutes. But in order to make sure that that does not happen, I still have my bottle of water, of course. Excellent. So today I suspect is officially vlog number 26 of my 90-day vlog challenge. And I thought, I've been speaking a lot of stuff over the last 25 days. I've really tried to touch on all the different aspects of running a business, on the different success secrets that I also talk about in my workshop. So I thought I want to do something different tonight. And I thought what I might do is read you a chapter from my book. Now, I'm not sure, if you've watched the movies. I've watched a lot of movies where there's an author and they go out to this bookshop and there's people that come in and the author sits in front and they're reading extracts from their book and everybody sits and listens, and then there's a book signing afterwards. Now, I don't know, in my world, that only happens in the movies. That's not going to happen in real life. So I thought, how about we do the online version of that? And what I want to do is read for you a specific chapter from my book. Now, the chapter that I have selected, so obviously it's the 7-figure practice, your 7-step blueprint for growing your startup practice to a 7-figure ultimate private practice. And I want to read you this one. It's probably back to front for you guys, which is chapter 1, and it's all about the reason why I'm here. And the title of chapter 1 is My Story. So it's really about, who is Gerda Muller? Where does she come from? Why does she do what she does? Now, I realize that some of you have been to my workshops, which means that you have heard snippets of my story. So normally when you come and you do either my How to Start a Successful Private Practice workshop, or you do the one for the practice owners, in the first section, the morning session, I'll talk to you a bit about the reason why I'm here and my story, but it only goes back so far because obviously on a workshop day, we only have a certain number of hours and we have a lot of content to get through. So what I've done in the book is I really went to the start, to where it really all started for me, to give you guys that whole backstory. I also realized that we've got lots of new people in the Facebook groups as well. I might read you about my story and really give you an insight into what makes me tick. Now, as I go through that, because I will be reading and I won't be able to look at your comments, if there's a section that really resonates with you, please press like, press love, so that I know that's the section that really resonated for you. If you're hands-free and you can actually type something on your phone, maybe give me a comment and let me know what about that part of the storyline resonated for you, whether it's maybe complete opposite of your situation, or maybe there's a lot of similarities that you can see between my life and my story and my journey and what it is that you have gone through. Alrighty, so we're going to get started. So every chapter in the book starts with a quote, and the quote that I have as part of chapter 1, which is my story, says, "Those who complain about glass ceilings should keep in mind that glass can be shattered if one strikes it hard enough and long enough." And that's a quote by Russell Madden. And for me, that has just been so reflective of the journey that I've had to go through. I reached the glass ceiling. It felt like, that's just it. I didn't know that there was any better until I started tapping. And then I realized, actually, there is a ceiling here. And maybe I need to tap a bit harder and maybe I can actually get through it, until I started, pounding on it, and finally you start to shatter through that, and that is the absolute best feeling. So for me, that was a really potent quote for my story. So let's get started. My journey as a psychologist started in a completely different country many years ago. It all began in my hometown of Despatch. It was called Despatch because it was built around a railway station where they dispatched goods from. I grew up and did all my schooling there. From around grade 8, I already had plans to one day help people in some way, shape, or form, and I decided that I wanted to become a psychologist. I was so super excited in grade 12 when, after applying for placements at 4 universities across South Africa, I was fortunate enough to be given my top placement choice. So that is going in from grade 12 as a first year student into psychology course. So obviously in South Africa, and you're getting all the extra bits now here with me talking. Hi Monique, thanks for joining me. So in South Africa, we don't have as many universities as here, and we basically at that time had 4 unis that I could apply for, and I got in with my number 1 choice. I also received a residential placement, which meant that I could actually live and study on campus, and everything was safe to go. I was actually so looking forward to being a student away from home. Because obviously I grew up in a small town, so the big lights were calling. But everybody I talked to told me how hard it was. Basically, I would need to study for 3 years. Then I would need to do my honors. And then after those 4 years, I could apply to get into masters. Now, it's very, very hard to get into masters. I know it's hard in Australia, but it's even harder in South Africa because we don't have as many universities as there are here in Australia. So to put it in perspective, in the city closest to my hometown, there would only be 1 university that could potentially accept me when the time came to apply for masters. The university only accepted 14 people every year. And again, an extra, and that was 7 for counseling stream and 7 for the clinical stream. And I thought, well, I'm not that clever. I'm never going to get in, no matter how hard I work. And I was really scared to study for 4 years, doing a bachelor, then doing an honors, and then not getting in. And in South Africa, you cannot be a psychologist with only 4 years of study. You have to do your master's in order to get registered. And I thought, I can't take that risk. I can't invest 4 years of my life into something and then not have a job at the end of it. So I'm a logical thinker. I guess the bottom line is I didn't believe in myself. Hi, Jessica. Thanks for joining. I didn't believe in myself. And I withdrew from my psychology course and enrolled in a 3-year travel and tourism degree because I always wanted to travel and I loved learning about new cultures in different countries. So I studied travel and tourism. I did really well, though I never got to travel because I was always at university studying and it was very competitive academically. And at the end of those 3 years of my travel and tourism degree, I got a job in travel and tourism. It wasn't hard and I immediately started working. Although I was good at what I was doing, I still did not feel fulfilled. Something was missing. And I then made the decision to go back to university and I started studying psychology again. This time just with a 5-year detour. How did I do it? I enrolled into a part-time psychology degree. So I had a full-time job as a personal assistant, working 5 days a week, and I started work at 8 a.m. in the morning and I finished at 5 p.m. I then had to be at what was called the part-time campus at the university by 5:30, and I would have classes until 9:30 p.m. at night. And I did that 4 nights a week, Monday to Thursday. I was enrolled into a full-time subject load while studying part-time and having a full-time job. Needless to say, weekends were all about study. I would get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. I would basically have a work day on a Saturday and Sunday. As I would study, I would do assignments from 8 to 5. And that was my life for the 3 years of doing my bachelor's degree. So nobody can say that I'm scared of hard work because I've worked bloody hard. That's not in the book, by the way. You just get the extras. Then I enrolled into honors and I had to do that part-time over 2 years as I had my first child, my darling daughter Cassidy, during the first half of my honors here. And then finally that day came, the day that I had to apply for a master's. That thing that I feared so much in terms of applying and potentially not getting in. As I was married at the time, of course, and I had a 9-month-old baby by now, I only applied at the one university that was within driving range, driving distance from my home because I wasn't willing to move away. I had a family. I went through all the master's interview processes and it was quite stressful, as you can imagine, as it was full on days of personality assessments. We actually had to do the MMPI, evaluations of us, interviews, and all this whilst I was still breastfeeding. Now, upon completion of the interview process, we were given a date and we were told that you could ring up and ask whether you actually got in on that date. And the lady, which in retrospect was the receptionist, would then say yes or no. So I was taking a real risk. And again, this is extras that's not even in the book. At the master's interview, they asked me, why did you only apply at one uni? So the culture in South Africa among psychology honors students is that you apply at all 4 unis, okay? So it was like this national tour that you would do at the last half of your honors here, where everybody would go to all these interviews, and I didn't because I wasn't going to leave my 9-month-old baby. Wasn't going to pack up my whole house and family to move for it. So I only had the one option. So back to the actual copy in the book. I clearly remember that day. So this is the day I had to ring up and find out whether I got in. It was a Friday. All my student friends were calling me on the phone, asking me if I'd already called because they were calling. Some of them had gotten in, some hadn't. I just couldn't get myself to call. Whereas all of them had called by 9 o'clock when the line opened. By 2 o'clock, I still hadn't called because I was so bloody scared that they were going to tell me that I didn't get in. It's that fear of failure. I'm sure you felt it before. However, I could not keep on delaying. I eventually called and I heard the amazing news that I got in. And that was probably one of the best days of my life. actually getting that acknowledgement and hearing that I can become a psychologist. It was so amazing, and a big family celebration, of course, ensued that Friday night. I finally was able to become a psychologist. It was during the intern year of my master's here that my husband and I then made the decision to immigrate to Australia. Australia, of course, as you all know, is a beautiful country. It's sport crazy, just like we are in South Africa. It has amazing weather, and it offers so many opportunities to the people that live here. People always ask me why I migrated to Australia, and the answer has always been to ensure the best possible future for our children. Don't get me wrong, guys. I love South Africa, but it is an unsafe country, and the opportunities are very limited. I wanted to come to a country that was going to offer my children the best opportunities when they are adults, and a country that would allow them to grow up safely into adulthood without the daily fear of being harmed in some way through the crime that was happening in South Africa during that time. We arrived here in 2005 in my birthday month of May, in the middle of winter. Before coming over, we basically sold up everything we owned. We did not leave any lifelines for ourselves back in South Africa. We sold our house, and we only brought over one container of furniture with us, and we closed all our bank accounts. On paper, we no longer existed in South Africa. We came to a country and a city that we had never ever visited before. People don't believe me when I tell them that we had never been to Australia. I did have an uncle who lived in Brisbane, and he said he loved it here. So I said, okay, well, we'll go to Brisbane then. We trust your judgment, and you're the only family we'll have in this country, so it's best to be close to you. My husband was really lucky. He immediately got a job because he's a tradesman, an electrician. But me with my fabulous master's degree could not get a job. And the reason for this was that we initially came over on a 4-year temporary work visa. So if you guys have been listening to the news today, there was actually a story about 457 visas, and that's how we initially came over. Our permanent residency visa was in the pipeline, but because we couldn't wait to make this amazing country our home, we decided to come over on a work visa whilst waiting for permanent residency. At the time, most of the psychology jobs were within Queensland Health, and they required permanent residency. I can clearly remember sitting in the little unit in Springwood in Logan, a south side suburb of Brisbane. It had no furniture yet because our furniture was due to arrive only 6 weeks after we did in that container on a big ship. And all I had was a camping chair that I borrowed from my uncle, an upside down empty box as a table, and my laptop on top of it. Upstairs, we were sleeping on a mattress on the floor with some bedding that I'd bought. The only other furniture that I had was a plastic tub full of cutlery that was donated to us by another South African family in order for me to cook meals for my family. Monique says, I immigrated to Australia in 1996. Wow, and my parents had also never been to Brisbane. Was a big adventure. It sure is, Monique. Well, hello guys. If you are still with me after all this, you are very patient. Way more patient than me, because I felt like throwing my laptop right over there. But instead, I moved locations, and I'm now sitting in my study, and hopefully this will work better. I am going to continue, and I'm hoping that the guys that are in the group, in the Facebook group, actually joins back up. Hi, Michelle Grosvenor. Thanks for joining. So what I've been doing for the last half an hour was reading to you guys chapter 1 of my book, which of course is my story. And as I've been going through it, I've been giving you all these extra little tidbits and comments and information that's not even in the book. So we were at page 5. And I'll just continue where I left off. If you are joining us only now, you've missed probably half or a quarter of it already. Okay, let's start then. I remember that day, and I remember day after day sitting in that empty unit, cold because we couldn't afford a heater or to put the aircon on heating, applying for jobs online and just getting rejection after rejection after rejection. It was really tough. I also had to put my daughter into daycare in order to go for interviews, but I kept going. I'm a very determined, very persistent and very disciplined person, something that has kept me in good stead when it comes to running my private practice as a business. So I just kept at it, and I eventually got a job with a company called Work Directions. Although it was only a case coordinator role, I jumped at the opportunity and I started working within their personal support program. The role was located out in Ipswich. At the time, I did not know Ipswich was so far from where I lived, but I took it anyway, and for the next 2 years I worked for Work Directions. It was an amazing company. They taught me so much, and I think in retrospect it was great as it gave me an opportunity to get to know the psychology industry whilst not being in private practice myself. I got to know all the regulations, all the laws and all the ethics around it all here in Australia and how it was different to that in South Africa. 2 years into my role with Work Directions, I fell pregnant with my second child, and of course I then went on maternity leave. Being at home, I started thinking, maybe this was the time to actually start my own private practice. Hello again, Munir. Thanks for bearing with me. You're very patient. Near my local shopping centre, there was this small room that had a for lease sign on it for many months. And I would often walk past it and just peep in and think, that's a perfect size for a consult room. What I liked about it was that it was at the side of the shopping centre, so people would only go past it if they had to specifically be there. It was the last shop and it was just so perfect. It even had its own little garden outside. I just kept my eye on it for the next 5 months and I finally rented it in April 2007. When I finally took that step, I resigned from Work Directions and I started my own private practice. I began doing only 3 days a week during school hours. It was really important for me to be there for my children. My older daughter had eldest, who's my daughter, has just started prep, and the youngest was now in daycare. The practice grew very fast, much faster than I could have imagined. Within 6 months, I was working 5 days a week, still doing school hours, was fully booked and had a wait list. I also noticed more and more people sending me referrals for children and adolescents. But I'm not an adolescent psychologist and I'm not a child psychologist, so I couldn't see those clients. As a result, I decided, maybe the time had come for me to appoint a child psychologist. The thing is that I'm an introvert and I always thought that solo private practice would suit me really, really well because I love dealing and speaking with my clients. I don't need other people around me. I go home, I've got my kids, I've got my husband. But even for me as an introvert, after a year of doing solo private practice, I really wanted other team members around me. People who have the same passions that you have, people you can just check in with and who are there during the day when you are at the practice, people other than your clients. After only 6 months, I went from being a solo private practice working out of 19 square meter room to appointing a child psychologist to work with me, and in quick succession I also appointed another psychologist to work with adults 2 days per week. As the child psychologist was doing 5 days a week, I had to move the practice from a 1-room practice to a 3-room practice. And that was a pretty big jump, but it was a very exciting one. My practice grew very fast over the first 3 years. Everything was smooth sailing, but it did not last, and it never does. What I quickly learned is that once you start to take on other team members, that is when you start to face a whole range of challenges not seen in solo private practice. As a practice or a business grows, the systems have to grow with it. Processes have to grow with it, and unexpected challenges can and will arise. And I had many, many challenges over the years. For example, during 2010, one of my best psychologists who worked with me full-time and had a consistently fully booked practice decided to start her own private practice, as people do. I really struggled to find a suitable replacement for her at the time, meaning that I had a room standing open, I was paying for rent, but I had no clients coming through the doors. Although the global financial crisis occurred in 2007-08, the consequences of that crisis were only in full swing during 2010. So it really took around 2 to 3 years for it all to filter back to the local community, meaning that clients were asking for bulk billing and were unwilling to pay our full fee. It seemed that no matter what I did, I just could not get my practice back to its former glory. What made this worse was the fact that this was all happening 2 months before I was due to open up my second group private practice. I started the Logan Home practice, and then I decided things are going so awesomely, I'm going to start a second practice in Kapalaba. And then all of these things started to go wrong. I was also 5 months pregnant with my third child at this point. And it was now that I started to wonder, why is this so hard? I knew something had to change, but I didn't know what. I just kept going, one foot in front of the other, taking action. But life had more challenges in store for me. I spent the next 6 months training my practice manager to run the practice during my maternity leave. I was determined to have a relaxing maternity leave with my last child. But guess what happened? 10 days after my son was born, I received an email from her telling me that she was resigning. I found myself lying on my bed crying my eyes out that day. I don't know if it was the hormones or just having had a baby or just genuine disappointment or possibly a combination of the two. After I had my little pity party, I pulled myself together and I did what I know works in times of crisis. I focused back on taking action. That's what I do. I'm an action taker. So I hired a new practice manager and trained her up whilst I was still on maternity leave, and I returned to full-time work 5 months later. I thought I had done well. I thought, yep, I'm taking action and the practice is getting more and more clients. It's going really well. I can do this. But like a lot of the clients that we see in clinical practice, I first had to reach rock bottom before I could admit that I needed help. Just want to check if there's any more comments. Rock bottom came for me in January of 2012. Now, most people tell me that January is a quiet month in their practice, but this is not the case in my practice, by the way. The thing that I couldn't understand in my practice was the fact that we were fully booked, but I had no money in the bank. It just did not make sense. I was sitting in my consulting room one day in January 2012, just checking emails, procrastinating. I had no idea as to why I had no money in the bank, and even less of an idea of how to solve the situation. Now, during my email procrastination session, I received this random FYI email from an HR contact about a business planning workshop that was being held on the last Friday of January. I was desperate and thought, well, what the heck, I don't know what else to do. I'll ring and find out if this will be suitable for a psychology practice, especially considering that it was quite expensive to attend for somebody with no money in the bank. I was lucky enough to get to speak to the actual presenter, Nathan McDonald from Black Belt Business, and he offered me 2 tickets for the price of 1. So I took myself and my practice manager to that workshop, and that day opened up my eyes to the fact that I had not been running my practice as a business. The rest, as they say, is history. I immediately, hi Shane, thanks for joining. I immediately signed up as a one-on-one business coaching client with Nathan, and I have been a client of his to this day. As a result of bringing him on board, I made so many changes, but they were all required to ensure that I turned my practice around. Yes, it wasn't easy, but it was the best thing I could have done. And of all the changes I made, these were probably the hardest. Shane, and for the others joining only now, what I'm doing is I'm reading an extract from chapter 1 of my book. So the first change I had to make was I fired one of my psychologists. This was one of my famous tears incidents, and the tears belonged to me, not the psychologist actually, surprisingly. That I often, and the tear incidents that I often refer to when running my PPS workshops. That is that I was in tears, not the person I fired. In fact, each time I've had to let someone go, hi Emily, thanks for joining, they actually took it pretty well. I was the one always overcome with guilt. However, as I pride myself on being the ultimate professional, I would ensure that I'd gotten all the tears out and processed my own emotions before implementing what needed to be done. The second change I made is I fired my accountant, who was really only being what I now know is an ATO compliance accountant. They were making sure I was dotting my I's and crossing my T's, but they weren't really working for me. And this was another really hard change because my accountant was also South African. And, it's people that we knew pretty well. The third thing I did is I actually moved my bookkeeping from Excel to a proper accounts management system. Yep, I also can't believe it. 5 years into my business, and I was still using Excel to do my books. How crazy is that? So I moved from Excel to MyOb, absolutely hated it, and then I started using Xero, a program I love and I'm still using to today. Now you might be thinking, boy, it must be hard to fire someone, or how can I know if an employee is doing a good job or not, and how do you do all of these things ethically? Believe me, it wasn't easy. I was so worried about what I could and could not do as a psychologist that I was procrastinating on my decision making, and I kept spending time reflecting on what I could or should be doing. I had to constantly really filter all the business principles that Nathan was throwing at me through my psychology principles before I could take any action. Needless to say, it was exhausting. And I constantly had to ask myself what the APS, that's the Australian Psychological Society, would say, what would APRA say, so that's our Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, what the Code of Ethics would say, how can I, and really how I was asking myself, how can I get the same results, but with another process? A process that is ethical in the allied health field, but is still effective. Needless to say, I spent the first year working with my business coach, and it was very painful emotionally, but so worth it. What I realized was that it is crazy to think that just because you are a psychologist or any other type of allied health professional, for that matter, that you can't let someone go when they aren't doing their job, especially after many performance-related discussions, of course. It is crazy to think that allied health professionals can't apply business principles to their business. And what is even crazier is when you think that you don't have to. To have a successful private practice, and I'm talking about success in the long run, you absolutely must run it like a business. I'm known for saying it's easy to start a private practice, but what is hard is building a private practice that is successful in the long term. And it can only be done when you run it like a business. You can do it in an ethical way though, a way that fits with your values, your vision, your team, your clients and your general community. I call this the profitable private practice mindset, something we're going to talk about in one of the later chapters. And just in case you were wondering, it is okay to have a profitable private practice mindset. Just last year, so now it's 2 years ago, in 2015, my private practice, the Psych Professionals, won the Queensland Mental Health Achievement Awards. That's right, a private practice took out the award in the category for Best Small Business Employer. For me as the practice owner, as a clinical psych and private practice success coach and mentor, that was the best possible endorsement. It showed that what I do in my private practice and what I will be teaching you in this book and what I teach in all my PPS trainings and programs is 100% ethical, effective, recommended, and okay. This means that you can implement what it is that you will be learning in this book, knowing that it has the stamp of approval of the mental health industry, including having a profitable private practice mindset. All you need to do is say yes to having your very own ultimate level 5 private practice. And that is the end of chapter 1. Thank you so much to everybody that stayed with me to the end despite the technical difficulties. Let me have a look at some comments. Monique says, Xero is awesome, plus my accountant and bookkeeping team to help me. Yes, the accountants definitely love it as well because they can actually log in remotely. So again, thank you so much for listening. If this really resonated with you, I'm so glad. I love sharing my story, and today you got all the extra tidbits that I don't share during my PPS workshops. If you really want to come and learn more and learn all the secrets that's in the book, of course, you've got 2 options. You can get the book for yourself. I'm still selling them. Got lots of copies here. But I always recommend coming to the workshop because it really allows you that opportunity to ask as many questions as you want. The second round for 2017 is kicking off in Brisbane in July. I would love to meet you in person, and I would really encourage you to take a day out of your practice to work on your business. This can be your day that changes your practice life. Like I had that Friday at that business planning workshop in January 2012 that changed my practice and literally changed my life. This could be your day like that by being at this workshop. So please do not delay. Take some action. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you sitting through me, through all the technical difficulties, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Have an awesome night. Bye.